Picture this. You're on holiday in the French Alps, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful Lake Annecy, sparkling blue water, crisp mountain air, just amazing scenery. You feel like you've stepped into a postcard. It's September 5th, 2012. This picture-perfect setting becomes the scene of a shocking crime, a crime that would grip the world, and remains unsolved to this day.
Yeah, it's that contrast, you know. The idyllic location with such a brutal crime, it really makes you think about where violence can happen. It shatters that illusion of safety we have about certain places, right?
Definitely. A British family, the Al-Hili Sard, Iqbal, their daughters, 7-year-old Zanab and 4-year-old Zina, along with Iqbal's mother, Suhaila. They were on a caravan holiday just enjoying this beautiful region. Their lives tragically crossed paths with Sylvain Mollier, French cyclist who lived nearby. All five were found shot to death in a secluded clearing called Le Martinet. It's accessible only by this deep forested road. So the questions we're going to try to answer this deep dive are, how did this happen and why?
From the get-go, right? The isolation of the crime scene, it just screams premeditation. This wasn't some random act of violence out in the open. This was targeted, planned, executed in a place where the killer probably felt confident they wouldn't be found.
And that brings us to Brett Martin. He was a British retiree cycling in the area. He stumbles upon this horrific scene minutes, potentially, after the shootings. The sound of the river nearby masked the gunshots. He had no idea what he was about to find. Can you imagine just coming across that? A bullet-ridden BMW, the body of Sylvain Mollier lying nearby, and 7-year-old Zanab, still alive but severely injured?
Martin, a former RAF pilot, he found himself facing an impossible choice. Stay and try to help the girl, risking his own safety if the attacker was still around, or ride for help, leaving a critically injured child alone. Talk about a split-second decision with huge consequences.
He chose to ride for help. It must have been an agonizing decision. Hours passed before authorities made another horrifying discovery. Zina, the 4-year-old, had been hiding under her mother's skirt in the car, alone.
8 hours. Just imagine that a 4-year-old child hidden in the aftermath of this unimaginable violence. This detail alone shows the human cost of this crime, the impact it had on everyone, not just the victims, but everyone involved in the investigation.
It's just heartbreaking. From the beginning, investigators had a puzzle. Robbery was quickly ruled out, valuables were left untouched. It suggests something far more complex. So who would target this seemingly ordinary family? And why?
The forensic work was meticulous, but it was hampered by the fragile state of the car. Every bullet hole, every piece of evidence was examined, but the answers were elusive.
Initially, the focus was on Sard al-Hili. Was he involved in something dangerous? Something that could have put his family at risk?
Don't forget, this was 2012. Concerns about terrorism were high. Investigators were quick to explore any possible links to extremist groups. Sard's work as a satellite engineer, the sensitive data on his laptop, it all raised red flags. Was he involved in industrial espionage? Was he selling secrets to hostile nations? These were the questions they had to consider.
And then there were the missing passports. Why would the family's passports be missing? This detail, initially overlooked, would become a recurring point of interest in the investigation. Did it point to premeditation on the part of the killer, or was there another, more innocent explanation?
Those missing passports added a layer of mystery that fueled speculation and really complicated the investigation. It's a detail that seems small at first, but in a crime as complex as this, it took on a life of its own. Sometimes it's those small details that can unlock the truth.
This is where things take a turn. While investigators dug into Sard's professional life exploring international espionage theories, they uncovered a more personal and potentially more explosive motive: a bitter family feud.
Sard and his brother Zahid were locked in a dispute over their father's inheritance. And we're not talking about some family heirlooms. This was a significant estate, including a flat in Spain and the family home in Claygate worth millions. To add fuel to the fire, their father's will had been frozen. It just complicated things further and really increased the tension between the brothers.
It was a real-life soap opera unfolding alongside this horrific crime.
Exactly. And Zahed's behavior during the investigation didn't help. He initially denied the feud, then admitted to it. He refused to travel to France for questioning, citing distrust of authorities. And then there were those mysterious phone calls to Romania. It raised suspicions immediately. Had he hired someone to silence his brother to eliminate the competition for the inheritance?
It seemed like investigators were closing in on a motive and a potential suspect. But this case, as you'll see, is far from straightforward. Those Romanian phone calls, they definitely added intrigue to the whole investigation. Did they have anything to do with the crime? Had Zahid, maybe driven by this inheritance dispute, reached out to someone in Romania? Maybe a professional hitman to pull this off? It seemed possible at first, especially with those unanswered questions about the missing passports. But, like, you'll hear things aren't always as they appear.
You know those Romanian phone calls? They actually weren't from Zahed at all. They traced them back to Sard. He was trying to get a hold of a manufacturer there to get a replacement part for his caravan. Talk about a wild goose chase.
Wow. It's crazy how a small detail like that can lead investigators down the wrong path.
Oh, absolutely. It shows how crucial thoroughness is in investigations. Every lead, even the ones that seem small, needs to be checked out and verified.
So with Zahia's Romanian connection ruled out, the focus shifted back to the professional hitman theory. The precision of the shooting, the cold, calculated nature of it all. It did seem to fit.
But there were things that didn't quite match up with a seasoned hitman.
Like what? Like the weapon they used, the Luga pistol?
Right, the Luga pistol. It's a World War II relic. An odd choice for a hitman today. Unreliable, hard to handle. Definitely not the weapon you'd expect a professional to use for something like this. It raised questions about the killer's expertise and their resources.
And the fact that the children were spared, would a real hitman hesitate to eliminate witnesses? Especially when those witnesses could inherit a fortune.
That's a great point. It's one of the most puzzling parts of this case. Some say it was a sign of mercy that the killer wasn't totally heartless. Others think it was a deliberate move to throw off the investigation.
So if not a professional, then who could have done this?
Well, as the investigation went on, there was a surprising discovery. Remember how Iqbal Sard's wife was portrayed as this quiet, traditional housewife? Turns out she had a past, a hidden life that even her family didn't know about.
Okay, now this is getting interesting. A secret past. What was it?
Before she met Sard, Iqbal had been married to an American man named Jimmy Thompson. They lived in the U.S. and she went by Kelly. She had a completely different life, nothing like the image she presented in the U.K.
That she was living a double life.
It sure looks that way, and there's more changing. Jimmy Thompson died on the same day as Iqbal.
Wow, that's quite a coincidence.
Almost too much of a coincidence, right? Of course it raised questions. Was there a link between Jimmy's death and the Annecy shootings? Was Iqbal involved in something dangerous back then, something she brought with her to the UK, something that led to this tragedy?
Sounds like something out of a spy movie.
Doesn't it? Investigators looked into every angle. Was Jimmy's death a coincidence? Or was there a sinister connection to what happened in Annecy? They even thought about exhuming his body to see if there was any evidence to connect the two deaths.
Did they exhume the body?
In the end, they didn't. The FBI looked into Jimmy's death and found nothing to tie it to the Annecy shootings. Officially, it remains a chilling coincidence.
But the fact that Iqbal kept this secret, it does make you wonder. What else was she hiding?
Absolutely. And this is where things take another turn. The focus shifts to Iqbal's mother, Suhaila. She was always a bit of a mystery, a quiet presence in the background. But remember the spyware on her computer? Why would anyone spy on a 74-year-old grandmother?
Yeah, that's a good question. And after the shootings, her home in Sweden was ransacked, documents, bank records, all gone. It's like someone was trying to make her disappear to erase any trace of her.
It really is one of the most baffling parts of this case. Was Suhaila involved in something dangerous? Was she the target all along? Or was she, like the rest of the family, just caught in the crossfire of something much bigger than they could have imagined?
So we have Sard, the satellite engineer, with a mysterious past and connections to Romania. We have Iqbal with her secret life in America and a deceased former husband. And Suhaila, the grandmother, with the spyware and the ransacked home. And we can't forget Sylvain Mollier, the French cyclist who was also killed. For a while, he was even considered a suspect. He was shot the most and was the only one who lived locally. Was it a case of mistaken identity? Was Sylvain the intended target?
Investigators definitely explored that. Remember, he worked at a factory that made nuclear components. Was he involved in something that made him a target for a foreign power? Was he selling secrets?
But he was just a welder. Did he even have access to that kind of information?
That's what they had to figure out. They examined his work history, interviewed his coworkers, and analyzed his finances. They found absolutely nothing to suggest he was into espionage or any other illegal activities.
What about his personal life? Any enemies? Jealous lovers?
There were rumors about Sylvain being a ladies' man, and investigators did look into the possibility of a jealous spouse or a lover seeking revenge, but again, nothing concrete came up. Sylvain's friends and family described him as a kind, gentle person. They said he wouldn't hurt a fly. He was well-liked and had no known enemies.
So we've looked at all the key players, and we're back to square one. We have a British family on vacation, a local cyclist, and a crime scene that points to premeditation. But the motive is a mystery.
And this is where investigators had to think about something they had initially dismissed: a random attack.
A random attack. in a peaceful, secluded place like Le Martinet.
I know, it seems hard to believe, right? But the area was known for being incredibly safe. People didn't even lock their doors. It's possible, however unlikely, that someone mentally unstable, someone with military experience and access to guns, could have been responsible.
It's a chilling thought.
Yeah,
It's a senseless act of violence with no reason. It's
yeah,
the kind of thing that makes you wonder if it could happen anywhere to anyone.
exactly. It's unsettling because it disrupts our sense of order and predictability. We want to believe there's a reason, a motive behind these acts. But sometimes the answer is more disturbing. There is no reason, it's just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Did they find any evidence to support the random attack theory?
They looked at psychiatric records, tracked down potential suspects who fit the profile, but nothing solid came up. They even considered a drug deal gone wrong, but the location was too remote for that.
So not a professional hit, not a family feud, not a random attack. What else could it be?
Remember the motorcyclist? The one seen near the crime scene around the time of the shootings? He was a prime suspect for a while.
The one with the unique helmet?
Yeah, they released a sketch hoping someone would recognize him, and someone did.
So they found him.
They did, and it turned out he was a paraglider scouting for locations. He had nothing to do with the crime, just another person in the wrong place at the wrong time, like everyone else involved in this, it seems.
So the mysterious motorcyclist was a dead end. Were there any other promising leads? It feels like every time they got close to an answer, this case just took another turn. What happened next?
Well, there was another twist, a pretty big one. The British investigators arrested Zahid Sard's brother for conspiracy to commit murder. You remember that inheritance battle we talked about? It seemed like they finally had their guy.
That's a major development.
Yeah.
What led to his arrest?
The British investigators, they'd been working with the French authorities. They felt they had enough evidence to tie Zahid to the crime. They thought he'd arranged the murders to get rid of his brother and get the inheritance all for himself.
But you said before those Romanian calls were from Sard, not Zahid.
Right. But the British believe Zahid was smart enough to hide his tracks. They thought he'd used someone else, someone with no connection to him, to arrange the hit.
So they searched his place. Did they find anything that linked him to the murders?
They didn't, and Zahid denied having anything to do with the crime. He was released on bail and still claims he's innocent. He even accused the French authorities of framing him.
Sounds like this whole thing was getting even messier, with accusations going back and forth and tension between the British and French investigators.
Absolutely. And it didn't help that the French authorities made some mistakes along the way. Evidence was mishandled, witnesses weren't interviewed quickly enough. There were even claims of a cover-up. It made you wonder if they cared more about their image than finding the truth.
I can't believe a high-profile case like this could have so many errors.
I know. And maybe the biggest blunder of all was the discovery of the missing passports. Remember those? The ones that sparked so much speculation early on?
Of course. Those missing passports were a big deal. Where did they end up?
They found them in Sard's jacket pocket. The same jacket that had been in police custody as evidence since day one.
You're kidding? They missed that for months.
It was a huge embarrassment for the French authorities. It just made people trust them even less.
So we have a messed up investigation. A family feud, international espionage theories. A mysterious motorcyclist who turned out to be harmless, and missing passports that were right there all along. It's overwhelming.
It is. And amidst all of that, the British investigators started having second thoughts about the investigation. They felt the French were too focused on Sard and his family. Their theory was that this whole thing started in France and that the Al-Hillis were just collateral damage caught in something they didn't understand.
If not the Al-Hillis, then who are they after?
The British thought Sylvain Mollier, the French cyclist, was the real target. One of the lead British detectives, Mark Preston, he even said so publicly. He pointed out that Sylvain's bike chain had come loose just before the shooting, making him a sitting duck.
So maybe the killer was waiting for him, watching him, and took the chance when he stopped to fix his chain.
That was their thinking. But the French never fully bought it. They insisted that they couldn't say for sure the order the victims were shot in.
It sounds like the investigation was at a standstill with the British and French on different pages. What happened next?
Well, there was another development, a very sad one. Remember Patrice Managallo, the firefighter who was questioned as a witness?
The one who lived near the crime scene?
Yeah. 2 months after talking to the police, he took his own life. He left a note saying he couldn't deal with the pressure of being a suspect.
That's awful. So was he involved? Did he have something to do with the murders?
That's the question that's lingered. But they never found any evidence to tie him to the crime. Some people think he might have known something he was too scared to share. Others think he was totally innocent. And the guilt of being connected to something so horrible combined with the stress of the investigation just became too much.
It's a tragic ending to a story that's already so full of sadness.
It really is. And even after years of investigation, all the leads and theories the Annecy shootings are still officially unsolved. The case remains open, and investigators are still looking into any new information they get.
So we've gone through all the twists and turns, the speculation and the heartbreak, and we still have more questions than answers.
Yeah.
What can we learn from this deep dive into the Annecy shootings?
I think it shows just how complicated these investigations can be, especially when you have different countries involved in international aspects. It also shows how the media and public pressure can shape an investigation. Sometimes it gets in the way more than it helps. And most importantly, it reminds us that even with everyone's best efforts, some mysteries might never be solved.
That's a hard truth to swallow, that even with all the technology we have today and global communication, some crimes may never be fully explained.
It is. And I think it speaks to how powerful mystery can be. The Annecy shootings, they still fascinate and frustrate us. It's a case that makes us rethink things, question everything, and leaves us feeling unsettled.
It definitely does. It makes you wonder what really happened that day at La Martiniere. What do you think? Share your thoughts and theories with us on our website or social media. We might even feature your insights in a future deep dive. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop seeking the truth.